All right, a lot going on there on Capitol Hill. So to break it all down for us is Dr. Karen Hult. She's a political scientist with Virginia Tech. Thank you so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox this morning.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So just break down for us what we saw yesterday going on there on Capitol Hill, President Trump and Democrats, this funding deal. What do we know about that, and where does this go from here?
Well, what we think we know right now, and of course things are changing at a volatile pace as they often do around Capitol Hill when it comes to budget issues. What seems to have happened is that there was an agreement between Charles Schumer, the minority leader of the U.S. Senate, and members of the Trump administration to at least work out a plan that would ask the Senate to divide the full bill that they were voting on, the so-called minibus from the House of Representatives, to break it apart between 5 departments funding bills that then would go through the Senate and agree with the House in moving those forward to prevent shutdowns for those kind of agencies, but at the same time carve out the Department of Homeland Security in order to respond to some of the concerns of some Senate Democrats, but also some Senate Republicans too, about the activities of ICE in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and we've been sharing this post here from President Trump. This is the latest we've heard from him on this as he shared this to Truth Social, saying he's really trying to work to avoid this. But, you know, a big talking point here, Democrats say they want curbs on ICE as part of this deal. So what kind of restrictions are realistically on the table here?
Well, there's a question, of course, of what the table is. If what the president and Minority Leader Schumer agreed to, what it would mean is that there would be an agreement in the Senate today that would have to go back to the House, at least on Monday, saying that the Senate would accept funding of all of the remaining five department appropriations bills through September. If that happens, then there is a 2-week carve out for additional negotiations to occur on what happens with the Department of Homeland Security. As I understand it really quickly, what the Democrats are asking for are clear, explicit guarantees written into the appropriation bills as riders, if you will, saying that ICE and Custom and Border Patrol need to follow existing protocols for stopping immigrants, for detaining immigrants, and putting them through a due process system. They also are asking that there be clear guarantees that of working and greater coordination between the federal agency at the one level and state and local officials at the other levels in terms of information and evidence of cooperation. So those are the kinds of things that will be negotiated on. What I think Mr. Trump is trying to do is get some breathing time for the various parties to sit down and talk in more serious negotiations, which have been going on behind the scenes, but it just wasn't going to end by midnight tonight.
Right. And going off of my last question there, Democrats are threatening to block the broader spending bill. But really, how much leverage do they actually have right now? And if this standoff continues, who's going to be the first to blink first, so to speak?
Well, this is difficult. One would imagine under the circumstances that this is going to be an issue that will be ultimately with a Republican president and Republican control of both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. One would imagine this would be resolved in the Republicans' favor. However, there are at least some Democrats who want to see what they can do to disrupt the entire funding package in the Senate. And senators have various kinds of privileges as individual senators, much as Lindsey Graham prevented a vote last night because he has raised another kind of an issue that it once rolled into other bills. And so that's what we can't tell is going to happen today. But on the whole, I think you're right. Ultimately, the Republicans will dominate. It's a question of how long it will take and under what conditions that will take place.
And, you know, Dr. Hult, we heard from Senate Majority Leader John Thune just last night saying there were snags on both sides.
Yes.
What does that tell us about divisions within each party here right now?
I think a couple of things. I think it tells us that there are indeed divisions among more, but they would classify them as among more conservative in the Senate, among more conservative Republicans. On the Democratic side, Democrats that want to see a bit more guarantees of concrete information and agreement to limit what it is that DHS is doing in Minneapolis and elsewhere around the country. It also, I think, underscores the fact that the Senate is, as everybody in all the listening audience knows, is a very different body than the U.S. House of Representatives. So they also are subject to any particular senator raising a point of order, putting temporary holds, or asking for multiple votes going forward. So that's always going to be a glitch. At the same time, this really raises the pressure on the House side. House Speaker Johnson, with a very narrow majority in the House, is also facing resistance from some House Republicans in particular, as well as House Democrats who are trying to block things going forward. So there are lots of details that have to be worked out among the negotiating parties.
And we've been talking short term here, really what to watch the next 24 hours on Capitol Hill, but long term, over the coming weeks, really, what can people expect to see? What do you think is going to happen long term?
Well, there's a short term that is through midnight tonight, and then a somewhat medium run term, and that is at least until next week and next Monday if the House Republicans cannot all be asked to come back to Washington because they're currently on recess, and they still are needed to cast a ballot in favor of whatever it is the Senate decides to do. So that's the medium run. In the longer run, the 2-week period, if that goes through both chambers of the Congress, that is going to be a very difficult set of negotiating tools to accomplish. And in the medium to longer run, what that means is that any of the activities that are taking place currently that are linked well into DHS, but that also may affect things like housing and social welfare and education, all of the appropriations bills that are not yet in law, those also will be part of the government shutdown that will start at midnight tonight if it goes forward.
Yeah, and going off of that, people at home are probably thinking another government shutdown. Here we go again. We just saw this happening here. So when we do talk about this partial government shutdown, what are Americans going to be seeing? Are they going to be feeling the impacts of that?
You know, it depends on what kind of Americans and where they are and what services they depend on. In the shorter run over the weekend, there simply will be some services that will not be available. That will be true of websites and those sorts of things. If it goes much beyond Monday, then we'll see some of the targeted impacts in places like if all of the other 5 appropriations bills aren't agreed to, those are going to come in housing and urban development. They're going to come in the education department. They're going to come in parts of the Department of War or Defense. So all of those cuts will be coming as well, at least in the short run.
Dr. Hult, is there anything else that you think I might have missed that the viewers should know at home who are watching this?
Well, as some of it is what we might think of as inside baseball, that so much depends on rules and individual agreements within both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, as well as across Pennsylvania Avenue between the Congress and the president. This is all quite volatile because people can change their negotiating positions and both their public comments and what they are saying in private. That's really difficult to track from the outside for many of us.
All right. Well, Dr. Hult, thank you as always for joining us on Live Now from Fox as we continue to watch what happens here. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.